Hi everyone, welcome to Trace of Burnout. I'm Roger.
And I'm Dan.
And we are happy to announce yesterday we participated in the 9th annual 22-man suicide awareness run with our good friend Mr. Ranger Rick, if you saw him a couple episodes back, here in downtown Fayetteville. So his organization, Through Tragedy Comes Light, they put on a really great event. No, Dan and I did not run.
Yes, that was a bit misleading.
Yes.
But we did partake in the ceremony.
We were
itself.
in the ceremony, and it was a tremendous honor to be a part of the whole thing. So really supporting the community here locally in Fayetteville, and then to the greater veteran community kind of at large. So we were really happy to be a part of that, and we hope to be a part of that in years to come.
Yep.
So really great stuff.
Met a lot of great people there.
Yep.
A lot of great people. So, but speaking of great people doing great things for Suicide Awareness Month, September, as you can see, we are wearing our Supreme Strides pins that our last guest, Miss Alicia Judd, gave us. So thank you, Alicia. It was a pleasure, and we will be wearing these in support of that organization and that endeavor.
Good.
And
really great stuff.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. And another endeavor. Our friends over at Beyond the Trek asked us a while ago, if you remember, to organize a workout for the month of September. We did that, and that video is now posted on their website.
And who are we honoring with the September video?
My brethren in the 1st of the 87th Infantry Regiment.
Who did what?
We were the 1st Conventional Ground Forces in Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks.
Very nice.
It wasn't at the time.
Dan's being modest. He was a part of that fun and frivolity.
Yeah, frivolity was not had. But everything's more fun in hindsight, right?
Oh.
So,
what do they say about nostalgia is history after a few drinks? Yeah.
I haven't heard that before, but I like it.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, we are also doing, we are slated anyway, to do a fireside chat with the folks over at Beyond the Trek after the new year. Yeah. So that is a little bit of a ways away, but we'll keep you posted on that. But we are on their agenda, as it were.
So we appreciate everything they're doing over there, and go check them out. So without further ado, we introduce to our next guest, Army aviator, Mr. Josh Martin. Stay tuned.
Enjoy. Josh, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you coming by.
No, thanks, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. You are our first rotary pilot. Rotor pilot?
Well, let's get something in.
Rotor wing?
Yeah, let's get this out of the way. Rotary wing. Are you a pilot? Are you an aviator?
That's a good question.
Is there a difference?
I honestly have always referred to myself as a pilot.
Okay.
I know there are people that go either way, but I honestly don't think it matters.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, but technically, is there a difference?
The services generally refer to their pilots as aviators. I don't know whether it's just like a more professional term or what, but...
Is that like a Joe Dierte thing? Like you're just trying to church it up?
It might be a little bit of that.
I'm way out of my depth of knowledge on this, but I do know that the aerodynamics of keeping a helicopter in the air versus a jet, plane, etc. are totally different.
Oh yeah, totally different. I mean, a helicopter's not meant to fly. When you've got thousands of parts spinning in all sorts of different directions, and aerodynamically, one thing could fail and you're falling out of the sky. But
all manufactured by the lowest bidder.
It's true. All right, but before we get into all that, do you have a family history of service?
So on my side, I do not have a family history of service. Neither of my parents were military or military affiliated. But on my wife's side of things, she's got a pretty storied history.
Okay, cool.
Did you know, so before you joined up, I don't want to get too far ahead, did you know her prior or after you'd already joined?
Oh, no, I didn't meet her until I was on my way out of the Army.
Okay. So we'll come back to that.
So you came in with limited knowledge of the military, is that fair?
Yeah, I would say coming in pretty limited knowledge, but I was definitely set at least middle high school age, that I wanted to go into the military in some form or fashion, and that's sort of where I set my sights on commissioning and being a military aviator. I always wanted to fly.
So where are you from?
So that's an interesting question, only because I answer it with a couple of different places, just based on where I spent the majority of my time growing up, where a lot of my family's from, and obviously where I was born. I'll start with Fremont, Ohio. Born in a hospital up there, to my dad, who was a general surgeon at the time, and my mom an operating room nurse. He was practicing up there at that time. Spent a couple of years there before they wanted to get the heck out of the Midwest and moved down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So grew up, I guess, ages 2 through 18 in New Mexico, but every summer we would spend back in central Ohio with the rest of our family that was still there and kind of rooted there, both on her family and my dad's family side.
Yeah, I know where Fremont is. My family hails from central Ohio as well. So also, the guest prior to you was also from Albuquerque. So
Yes.
as fate would have it.
That's a strange coincidence.
That is interesting.
So at some point you did make a wrong left turn at Albuquerque.
I mean, Albuquerque was great. I mean, I love the Southwest, but I don't know that I'll ever end up back there. But
Fair enough.
it's a good place to be for those years.
Okay, so you're in high school in Albuquerque and you get the bug and you want to join the military. How did that come to pass?
So I guess it was family, friends, really, being connected through activities as a kid, or one of my dad's classmates from his high school experience ended up being a fighter jet pilot. And so between their accounts of flying in the Navy or, flying in the Army, and having these conversations and sort of seeing where their careers ended up, it was one of those things that I thought to myself that would be a really, really cool or an interesting path to pursue in life as I expand, within one of the areas that I viewed as a passion of mine in being airborne. I was always sort of fascinated with flight, from the time that you're a little kid and you look up in the sky and see airliners or other planes, working a pattern somewhere. And as soon as I think I was probably 14 when I had an introductory flight lesson, and I was hooked at that point. I had one other pilot in my family who kind of, I guess sparked everything for me. But, other than that, I viewed the military as sort of a way that I could parlay that interest into a career and build some time without coming away with a ton of student debt or other debt to finance all these ratings that you, I guess, have to have if you want to be an airline pilot.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay. So your immediate family doesn't have a history of service, but I guess that immediate friend group encompassing your family, that's what influenced you.
Yeah,
or I guess assisted in influencing you.
Yeah, I would definitely say assisted in influencing and sort of inspiring the path that I took, with respect to the military, and I would say more specifically consideration of service academies.
Yeah. So I guess with the service academies, what were you looking for, and why did you choose the one that you did?
So I ultimately was more interested in flying in the military in general. So a little bit less, particular about, I'm only applying to Navy, or I'm only applying to West Point, or only to Air Force. I thought it would be really cool to fly fast movers on and off of an aircraft carrier somewhere. So I think at that point in life, Navy was my number one choice, and was one of the first academies that I actually visited when we were in high school and on one of our East Coast road trips. And so it was kind of my favorite. But being in New Mexico, made a trip up to Colorado Springs a time or two and saw the Air Force Academy, and thought that would be pretty cool too. I never actually visited West Point until I showed up there for our day. But it ended up being the one that kind of landed in my lap as a result of medical fitness for military service. I was initially disqualified for a peanut allergy, of all things.
Weird. Okay.
And despite a letter of assurance that I got from the Air Force Academy and from the Naval Academy, they were like, sorry, but we're just not going to give you a waiver for a nut allergy. So good luck. And
what year is this?
So this was 2000. 2008.
Is this about the same time that they stopped serving peanuts on airplanes?
I think that was like, I don't know, sometime
Because there was a
05 to 08
there
or
was like
something
a
like
few
that.
year period where everybody was freaking out about like peanut allergies and stuff.
I mean,
Like
to be honest, everybody kind
the
of blows
dust
that
in
out
the
of
air.
proportion.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's people.
Yeah,
But
you're right.
okay, so a peanut allergy
Yeah,
led you to
peanut
West
allergy.
Point.
Yep. So
Okay.
a peanut allergy. The other two, the Air Force and the Navy, they said they wouldn't waive it. I kind of went back to the Army. I was like, is this something you guys work with? And they're like, yeah, absolutely.
Come on, man.
down. And so
They'll take anybody.
apparently, but that's what led me on my path, and let me choose West Point, being the service academy that was willing to work with me on the medical front and accept me. And obviously there's a nomination process and a number of other things that you kind of have to go through if you're trying to go to any of the service academies. But I think that was my even beyond the other civilian universities and programs that I was looking at. I also considered Embry-Riddle and doing ROTC and going to like a big state school like Ohio State or Penn State. But for me, I was still really trying to scratch that service itch.
Okay, so you are the first person that I guess has gone through the referral process to get into a service academy. So can you talk about that? Like some of the things that you had to do and some of the contacts that you needed to make?
So I think that this is a process that probably varies depending on the state that you're coming from and what your ties to service are. As somebody that didn't have someone currently serving or a history of military service, you're pretty much reliant on your senator or your congressman to be able to nominate you and give you the nomination for a slot in a service academy. And they can give so many nominations a year to each academy just based on their district size or the population in a state. So coming from New Mexico, where I had a congressman and two senators to be able to apply to, they kind of war game around and figure out who's going to nominate who to what academy. And there's generally not like a gigantic pool. Like Albuquerque at the time was a city of maybe 800,000 people, the biggest population center in New Mexico. And even out of all of the big high schools there, you might have a dozen or total 12 kids that were applying or really seriously considering the service academies. So there are certain things that you kind of have to do or are encouraged to do to boost your resume when it comes to getting those nominations.
Certain things like what?
Like extracurricular activities are really what sets it apart for a lot of people.
Sports, community service.
Sports, community service.
Yeah.
So like Boy Scouts is a big one. Familiarity with the legislative process. So whether that's boys or girls state or going through and doing like debate clubs in school or anything like that, or it just sort of demonstrating your well-roundedness as a candidate in those high school years.
Okay, so how long did that process take?
It was probably a couple of years of like really trying to make sure that it was something that I was interested in and trying to demonstrate that I was going to be a solid candidate. And being pretty busy with sports and Boy Scouts, and I did Boy State I think 1 or 2 summers before the application season and everything like that, just to make sure that I could present a compelling case for admission to any of the academies. But that's sort of what a lot of candidates and high school guidance counselors are encouraging people to do when it comes to really thinking about service academies, especially if you're not coming from a history of service or a tie or a parent that was a grad.
Right.
Are you an Eagle Scout?
I am, yes.
Very nice.
So you got to beef up the portfolio.
Yeah, a little bit.
What sports did you play in high school?
In high school, I lettered in swimming, cross country, I also played water polo, and I played football my freshman year.
Whenever I think of New Mexico, the first thing I think is high school water polo championships.
I'm just impressed. Running cross country at altitude's impressive, so that's good.
I mean, cross country was my way of getting in shape for swim season. Swimming was my number one sport. I been a year-round swimmer as a club athlete from the time I think I was 5 or 6. So, short of getting recruited to swim in college anywhere, it was my primary outlet outside of school.
Okay. Cool.
Perfect. Okay.
So who ended up nominating you? I mean, do you know? Do you know, or is it just you've been nominated?
So, I'm trying to remember. At the time, Heather Wilson was the congressman for my district, and she was an Air Force Academy grad and one of the first classes of women at USAFA. And I believe it was her that provided my nomination, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
So you show up to West Point.
Mm-hmm.
What's day one like?
So I initially fly into Newark, New Jersey, get off the airplane, and they bus all of the candidates that are coming in without their parents or initial family support to the hotel, probably like 5 miles outside of or away from Newark, where we were going to stay the night, and then get bused at like 4:30 the next morning up to West Point.
Ooh, that's good.
So you show up there and you start running into all these other candidates that you realize are going to be in the same class, and I think at the time I was just so unsure of what to expect, and a little bit nervous, but at the same time excited, that I prioritized getting a little bit of rest before the gauntlet the next day, and I think that was probably the right choice. So
your candidates, is that the
technically you're a new cadet candidate.
That's plebes.
So you start out when you go through our day, you become a new cadet, and as a new cadet, that's sort of what you are for that entire summer. So it's instead of a recruit or a candidate, it's new cadet Martin, and they ask you a piece of knowledge, or they chew you out for not doing something right, or any number of other things. So you're a new cadet first, and then you get accepted into the Corps of Cadets on A Day, which is the weekend following that first week in school, where you kind of after an 8-week basic and the rest of the summer activities are kind of formally welcomed into the longer line of West Point cadets, and you progress from there to plebe year, which is the first year, yearling year, which is the second year. Everybody just calls you a yuck or YUK for whatever reason. The next year is cow year, or being a junior cadet, and then your first year, your senior year, is really the best year.
Yeah. So I know there's got to be a lot of really good stuff in that summer intro period. You said it was 8 weeks.
I think it was about 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, not like a full basic, but just the very basics.
Eye opening for a lot of people, I would.
Oh yeah.
So what was the washout rate? I assume this is very rigorous, very mentally and physically taxing, all the things. Like, what's your washout rate? I
think on our day there were maybe high 1,200 or almost 1,300 cadets.
Cadet candidates?
Yeah, people that were coming into my class, and then ultimately, I think we finished the summer with about 1,150, maybe 12. Okay. So like, not quite 10%, but definitely got rid of a few.
Significant, but not quite a bloodbath.
That's right. Noticeable.
Right. It's really more, I think, the whole experience. I think my class graduated either just shy of 1,000 or maybe right there at the 1,000 mark. So over the course of the 4 years, between academics and everything else, you do lose a few more.
Yeah, of course.
So for that initial training, those 8 weeks between R Day and A Day, right? Mm-hmm. What was was it all just basically like military adjustment training, like basic physical marksmanship stuff like that, or was there some academic stuff too?
No, it's really pretty much all military stuff. Okay. The basics of military order and discipline, the intro to the field stuff and sleeping out in the woods, and the intros to L-shaped ambushes and just basic platoon type tactics.
7-8.
Or squad type tactics, rather.
Yeah.
Just a quick departure. When you were a scout, did you ever go to Philmont?
I did not.
Okay.
No.
That's a big thing in the Southwest, because you're used to camping.
Yeah, it was none of that stuff was surprising for me. Like it was actually the stuff that I enjoyed about the summer. It was you didn't fold this corner on your bed, and all the stuff in
you're a terrible person.
Your third drawer down is not folded right, and it looks like crap.
Yeah.
Go fix it.
You didn't roll your socks properly, so therefore you're a bad person.
Yes, basically. You're gonna be a
kill your entire squad.
You're gonna get people killed.
Yep. You're going to be a failure here because you bloused your boots too high.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so just general cadet life. You integrate pretty well. What are kind of your main takeaways from life as a cadet at West Point over the 4 years?
I think over the 4 years, it really taught the art of prioritization and being able to balance the academic workload as well as athletics, any of the other extracurricular things that you were trying to lean into, and overall just being able to work as a unit and focused on something that was greater than just yourself.
Yeah.
Just the way that everything and the experience is structured and all the different touch points you get throughout your experience are really formative in those years in life, just to kind of build on the teamwork aspect of life and being able to form the relationships that I think are going to be instrumental to the rest of your time in the military. Sure. Or time after the military.
Yeah,
even. So.
Absolutely. Were you able to carry on your water polo career at West Point?
So I actually played all 4 years on the club water polo team at West Point. It was not a...
Is that like an intramural kind of...
So it was... At West Point and all the academies, everybody has to be involved in some form of athletics, whether it's intramural at the company sort of level. Then they have actual formal club athletics that are sports that have collegiate clubs that are governed by entities outside of the school or outside of a division or something like that. And then you have we call it core squad, or like Division I athletics.
Mm-hmm.
That's NCAA.
Yeah, exactly, NCAA. And so the club team sat in that middle tier, which was enough to kind of get you out of the mandatory drill and ceremony and other I call it mandatory BS that West Point makes you do if you're not a club or a...
I can assure you, it's not just West Point that enjoys doing those things.
No, but it was a good outlet for me, helped keep me sane, and got me out of the dumb stuff that I thought was stupid.
Yeah, but I mean, you briefly mentioned it earlier, but how did you find it balancing athletics and academics? I mean, you had been doing it since you were in like middle school or earlier. So was it harder at West Point?
I think it was definitely harder. West Point and like the academics there were certainly a humbling experience for me. I came from being a 4.0 student in high school, and pretty much all through middle school I think I'd kept up straight A's to all of a sudden C pluses and B's and the occasional A minus here or there at West Point. Not that it was like really anything that bugged me or bummed me out, but it was just like I felt like it was a 4-year experience in drinking from a fire hose and trying to stuff all kinds of crazy knowledge down the gullet, and actually being held to a standard that's not, did you actually just do your homework or not?
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So branching. I know West Point does branching. I was an ROTC guy, so I'm more familiar with how ROTC and to a lesser extent OCS works. But West Point generally gets kind of the first crack at branching. So kind of explain how all that works.
So from my understanding of how branching at West Point works, it's a little bit of a different method now than I think it used to be, and it was kind of in flux as I was a cadet. But everybody it thinks it's based on, you know, sort of the order of merit and, you know, your competitiveness within your class based on the rank that you put for all, I think, 16 of the different branches that we had a choice of when I was a cadet. And so everybody goes through the West Point experience, and they're graded. You're evaluated on the military side, on the athletic side, as well as on the academic side. Academics definitely weighs the most. I think it's like 55% of that equation, and then athletics and then military round out the rest. And, you know, depending on how you perform, you know, as a cadet and as a leader in your summer experiences, that, you know, all gets computed into the military score. You know, whether you, you know, athletically, you know, it's just, you know, did you participate or not? You know, were you trying to sham out of, you know, athletic stuff, or did you fail your PT test, or any number of other things like that impact your physical score? And then academically is just pretty much based on your GPA. It doesn't necessarily matter whether you're in a really hard major or a really easy major. It's just, you know, down to the GPA at that point. And so around the, I want to say, fall of your senior year, you're basically asked to submit your preferences for those 17 branches. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether or not you even want to consider a branch, you have to rank it. So, you know, 1 to 16 or 1 to 17 in terms of your preference. You have probably about a week or 2 weeks that whole process is open for you to, you know, go in, change stuff around, figure out with your friends like what you ultimately want to do, what your grand plan is for when you graduate, and, you know, you all try and go to the same.
We're all going to go to the 82nd together. Yeah,
same bullet class or same unit or something like that. And, you know, you switch it around a little bit, and then it gets locked, and probably I forget what the timeline is, but a few weeks after that is branch night, which is typically the beginning of November every year. The entire class goes into this big auditorium where they can fit, you know, over 1,000 people, and you all sit with your company mates, and the TAC officer hands out an envelope that's got your name on it, nothing else. And, you know, when they say go, you have the opportunity to open the envelope and figure out what your fate is for
yeah, it's kind of like the jury
the next 5 years,
giving the verdict to the judge what the next 4 to 8 years of your life is going to look like.
Exactly.
So I assume you got what you wanted as aviation?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So before that, do you remember? I'm sure you ranked aviation number 1.
Mm-hmm.
What did you rank 17?
I think I probably ranked chemical core 17.
Everybody puts chemical left.
Yeah, chemical or MP or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Checks out.
Okay. So you got what you wanted.
I did.
You got aviation.
Yeah.
Then what?
So, you know, you end up opening your envelope and everybody celebrates, but there are going to be inevitably those ones that sit there and they're kind of like
the boo-boo lip.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that night you go out and you celebrate with all your friends and company mates, and, you know, probably drink a little bit too much, but you know, after that you get kind of settled into the you know, idea of, oh man, this is, you know, going to be a reality, and you really embrace that, you know, as you're still a cadet, but you all of a sudden are a firstie, and you're, you know, starting to wear the branch insignia of where you're going, and, you know, you kind of see that across the class, and you can tell who's happy about it, who's not, but everybody's, you know, kind of in this reinvigorated mode of you know, being motivated to push to graduation and get finished with their experience just so they can go start their I guess purpose life in the military.
What was the worst reaction you saw to somebody not getting what they
in the
wanted?
big auditorium?
Well, I mean, whether it was in the big auditorium or
afterwards,
afterwards, what was the worst reaction?
I don't know that I saw anybody that had like a super negative or pouty reaction to what they got branched. I think there are some people that, you know, may have gotten force branch chemical or force branch air defense artillery or something like that, you know, didn't want it. But I think that they realized that they're, yeah, I don't know that there's a terrible branch or like as a officer in the Army,
Well, I mean, somebody that had their sights set on, engineer, right? And then, they wind up in finance.
I think there's honestly, there's so much, that people are prepared for going into branch night and like what they realistically can expect knowing their class rank. Like everybody gets an idea every, probably semester where they stand in the OML. And where branches have previously gone out. I think it's more the people that may have been on a cusp of something. Yeah. Like I know people that really wanted aviation that were like 500-600 in the class, and wouldn't have gotten aviation unless they ADSO'd and added an obligation for an additional 3-4 years onto their already extended obligation as an aviator.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what I was really looking for is a story about lieutenants or future lieutenants crying.
That's really what he wants to hear.
Nothing sticks in my head, but I'm sure there were plenty of tears that got shed that night.
I mean, I can speak more to the Army officer side. That's kind of my wheelhouse. But if you get a branch that you don't want, there is still some kind of recourse, even if you have to go do that for a couple of years. But there's such thing as branch details where you do something and then you change over, or you can assess into special operations, which we'll get to. There's a way out. So if you end up, oh no, I didn't want to be an MP, just go be lieutenant, go learn basic leadership stuff, and then we'll figure out the rest later. So
officers always have a way out of doing things they don't want to do.
Yeah. We call it recourse. That's the official.
Yeah.
So so you did say that you get to start wearing your branch insignia at that point. Did I mishear you on that?
No, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's big then. That's huge because now you're in now, right? Like you're.
Really, I mean, it feels like it. I mean, that's something that I think has changed back and forth a couple of times, over the years. But you at least get to see in your class, who chose what branch, and like, okay, now you can sort of get a little bit of a better read on them, and
these personalities too. So you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. So this is fall of 2011.
This is fall of 2011.
Okay. So at this point, Iraq is drawing down, but ISIS hasn't really reared its head yet. So I'm trying to place us in time and space here. So we're several years after the surge, and everything's more or less calmed down.
Yeah, it definitely
is still ongoing at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're coming off of the previous spring when OBL and that May 2nd raid.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay, so that kind of puts us
motivated. Yeah,
that kind of puts us in historical context. So you end up commissioning the following spring, and what happens next? You off to your first station, right?
So I commissioned May of 2012, and ended up being right back at West Point for that summer as a land navigation officer in charge.
Yep.
Doing sort of summer detail stuff, managing a couple of land nav lanes for the summer training at school.
So that's it, brand new cycle lieutenants. I know, Dan, you did some work details at
Camp Natural Bridge.
Yeah.
Training they were upcoming sophomores. They were upcoming second year.
Yeah, for the summer CST.
Yep.
Perfect. And then you get your. It was Bullock at that point. They were calling it Bullock.
Yeah, it was still Bullock. Yeah.
I'm old enough we didn't have Bullock when I went through. It was OBC. But, so off to Rucker, now Nova. So.
Landed at Fort Rucker. I want to say probably September, October timeframe. I took my 60 days of leave or whatever I got after I commissioned, and build some of that in before the summer training on the land nav lane, and then a little bit after before I went down to Bullock. But showed up to Lower Alabama, or LA as we call it, and
that's right.
I think my Bullock class was October, November timeframe, straight into SEER school. I do remember SEER school was right around or over Thanksgiving, so I missed out on that time, with family, and got to spend it freezing cold in the woods.
Let's do some acronyms real quick.
Yeah.
So Bullock is the basic officer leader course, and for everybody listening, that is for brand new second lieutenants, that is a course that every branch, irrespective of whatever branch you have, is going to be more or less the same. Mm-hmm. So you'll go through Bullock B, which is really the second part, at your respective training station, and then after that you roll into the actual training portion of your lieutenant pipeline. And then SEER school, we'll talk about SEER school just a little bit. So what is SEER school?
So SEER school is something that all of the aviators end up having to go through, at least in the Army, and still some of the special operations pipeline go through SEER C, which is a sea level search or survival, evade, resist, and escape course. I think I've across the military, I know Washington State, Alabama, and North Carolina are some of the locations they conduct the similar.
There's some urban courses and stuff
too. And you get into some specialty flavors there too. But that was 3.5 weeks of my time in the Flight School 21 pipeline, as they refer to it.
And it's at the beginning of the pipeline?
So you can go through at various points. They kind of filter you based on the volume of classes, where you're programmed, and what they can accommodate in the course load, around training breaks and other stuff like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you do that and then go into actual aviation school.
So I finished SEER school in early December, and kind of was sitting waiting to start actual flight school.
Gotcha.
And I do remember that pretty much all of December sitting on funeral detail, just kind of waiting for the call to figure out where I was going to go, the next 2 days or 3 days in the local area to support a veteran funeral or something like that with military honors. And that was kind of the filler that they used at the time in flight school for all of the lieutenants or warrant officers that were waiting or in between their flight classes.
But you missed out on Thanksgiving, but you're starting to get your calorie intake back to normal. It's a good time of year, I guess, for the holidays.
Yeah. No, it definitely prepped me for as much holiday eating as I wanted to do that year.
The one we do here at Camp McCall, where they call it the McCall Weight Loss Program.
Yeah. I definitely lost a few pounds.
Yeah, perfect.
So how long were you on the funeral detail wait list?
It was probably, at least a month, if not a little bit more doing that. But I think I did that 2 or 3 times between SEER and actual flight school, my basic flight course, and my advanced airframe, or in between some of the other courses down there. So,
But in between courses, they always sent you back to the funeral detail standby period.
Just kind of as like a holding platoon, if you will, instead of instead of like a lawn cutting detail. I should figure that was a little bit more.
No, I got you.
At this point, have you chosen which airframe that you want, or is that still TBD?
So at that point, I went into it thinking like, I'm open to anything, but I'd probably prefer something that's got guns on it, just based on where my interests lie and sort of my understanding of all of the communities. But ultimately, that decision hadn't been made yet. I don't think that ended up coming into play until later that spring, when you finish your first phase, in whatever basic helicopter you fly, and then again, it's kind of like the OML process of seeing who's got what where, and get to choose by how well you do in Bullock and your first phase in flight school.
So come New Year, probably after the New Year is probably when the academics start, right?
Yeah.
And I would think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's a lot of aerodynamics and a lot of theory kind of at first. Yep. Does that sound about right? So
yeah,
kind of walk us
that's
through
exactly sort of how the classroom stuff is at first. And that first phase of flight school, you've got your ground school classes, which you said aerodynamics, flight publications and regulations, as well as the FAA, understanding of the airspace system, etc. That's all the ground school, and you also have, or kind of are getting ready to start your flight lab, or like actual in the aircraft portion, learning how to manipulate the controls, start the aircraft up, hover,
which is the hardest thing, right?
Stuff. I mean, that's what everybody says, but it's just one of those things that just kind of clicks at some point.
Were you able to learn all this stuff on different aircraft, or was there a specific model aircraft that they were like, that this is your training model?
Yeah, at the time that I went through flight school, it was still the TH-67, which is basically a Bell Jet Ranger, or a Bell 206, just had the civilian TH-60 whatever in front of it based on the military contract for those helicopters. But the inside, the instruments were, basically what you would find in a normal, news or Aeromed helicopter.
Okay. But I mean, that's basically
that's what at least every Army aviator starts
introductory rotor.
Yeah,
rotary.
Exactly. And I mean, the other branches do it a little bit different. With they generally start with a fixed wing portion and a little trainer aircraft, and then you go into a little bit more powerful aircraft, whether or not you fly helicopters or fixed wing. Mm-hmm. So the Army is really the only service branch that exclusively does all of their training in helicopters, unless you get assigned to a fixed wing unit, in which you go through a fixed wing course.
We do have, but they're few and far between them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in flight school.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you've chosen your airframe, and you get the one you want, I presume, right?
Yeah. So I go through the first phase and fall into our selecting class, and I'd done all right, I guess, and well enough to get my choice, which was the OH-58 Delta Kiowa Warrior. I ended up selecting that aircraft, and then about a month later is when the Army announced the divestiture plans with the aviation restructuring initiative that they were, I guess, talking about at that time, and figured it was going to be a little bit longer that I'd be able to fly that aircraft, and we'd have some degree of ability to deploy in that platform. But unfortunately for me and my timeline and the unit that I ended up going to, I ended up missing out on one of the last Afghanistan rotations that they did with that aircraft.
Yeah. So this is probably a whole other discussion, but why did the Army go away from the OH-58, which is a scout aircraft? So again, just to frame this for everybody, it's a light, very small aircraft that's used for, scouting, right? So reconnaissance, very fast, get in, get out, has enough firepower really to keep people off of you, but not really an attack aircraft per se.
Right.
A couple of Hellfire missiles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, different configurations, etc. The intent of the mission of that aircraft was really to support the CAV sort of units on the ground with their
screening missions.
Exactly. And being able to mask yourself, unmask, gather intelligence, the whole act of reconning a specific objective, and I think the Army ultimately went away with from that platform, partly because it was still a single engine platform, which in the way of like aviation safety, a lot of people were starting to view as being less safe than having multi-engine. They all auto-rotate kind of the same way, and as long as you're cognizant of your power outputs or requirements in a lot of different places, I would argue that you're still not any more in danger flying a single engine than a
Please explain what an auto-rotate is.
It's essentially using the aerodynamics of the rotor system and the ability of the air to flow up through the rotor system to keep it turning and maintain rotor RPM until you are close enough to the ground where you apply a little bit of the collective to be able to arrest your descent using the remaining RPM the rotor has.
So in the layperson's terms, it's you're using the
it's a controlled crash landing.
You're I don't even know if I can explain this properly. It's a way to do it with little or no power dropping straight down, but you're using the aerodynamics of the rotors in order to slow the descent to where you can survive. It's not meant to be a very comfortable landing.
Exactly.
Have you ever had to do one of these, or am I getting ahead of myself?
No, I've not had to do one, completely power off.
Okay. Good.
I mean, you practice it all the time.
You practice.
But
okay, so you get the OH-58. So hey, this is a great aircraft. However, the writing is on the wall for that. You finish up flight school and you go off to your first duty station, which is where?
I end up going to the 101st, Fort Campbell.
Okay.
At the time, Fort Campbell had two Combat Aviation Brigades or CABs. They had the 101st and the 159th. at the time that I had my orders, it was unclear whether I was going 101 or 159, but ended up showing up and found out I was going to the 101st when I got to Campbell.
Was that what you wanted?
I think in the long scheme of things, it ended up working out best for me. The 159 was kind of getting ready to case its colors when I arrived, and they had a little bit of a shorter timeline between actually extending the life of their Kiowa and their squadron compared to the 101st and 217, which is a squadron that I was in.
Okay. How was it at Campbell? How was it? I mean, because you're not in any sort of training environment anymore,
right?
I mean, you bounced from school. You haven't stopped schooling since you were a kid, because from high school to college, to into the military, and bouncing from school to school to school to learn your proficiency.
You finally made it.
You finally made it to your job. How was it?
I don't know that I, would have looked at it that way. When I was in that position, I was always focused on, just the ride and the experience. And to me, like, flight school didn't seem like that much of a, academic exercise or school to me. I probably felt like I was already doing my job then. But getting to the 101st was definitely cool and gave me, I guess, a little bit of perspective on what the actual Army was like now that I was, out of the cadet environment and out of school, out of TRADOC, out of, the, class with all the other second lieutenants and W1s and stuff like that, and finally in a place where it's like, okay, now I'm actually going to be responsible for people. And I think for me that was something that I was always looking forward to, but based on experiences at school as a leader throughout summer trainings or through leadership in athletics or within company and like the military side of the West Point system, it was something that I think I was ready for, and just another good experience for me.
So you were prepared for
I felt prepared, but you probably ask any of the people in my units or platoons, and they probably like, look at this West Pointer over here, thinks he's got.
I'll have you know that nobody ever gives West Point lieutenants a hard time. Were you air assault qualified when you reported into the 101st?
I was, yes.
Okay, so when did you go?
So I did air assault when I was, I think, the summer between my plebe and yuck year.
Okay. Go as a cadet. That's a good time to go.
Yeah. So I went as a cadet, but it was we had one of those mobile training teams
MTTs.
or whatever.
They came up to you.
They came up to an Army Guard or Reserve base in New York, and they did it up there, and it was a whole bunch of cadets and a couple of TAC officers that I'm going to use this opportunity to get West Point or to get air assault qualified and go through that pathway. But it just makes the black hats a little bit more. They like to have fun with the cadet groups. I'll put it that way.
That's fair. Do you think that air assault school is the 10 hardest days in the Army?
No, I mean it was fun. I thought, but
did they give you that speech at your graduation about the 10 hardest days in the Army?
I don't even remember my graduation from air assault school, honestly.
Okay,
I've always kind of laughed at that idea that that's the 10 hardest days in the Army. I mean, I've never been to combat diver school or anything like that, but I would imagine that's much more difficult.
You could probably pick any 10 days in a deployed combat zone that are harder than air assault school.
Okay, well, yeah, fair enough. We're talking about TRADOC, but yes.
But I never understood that slogan and why they say that.
Yeah. I mean, it's all all a facade, I think, between airborne school or air assault school and the way the black hats think that they own you. And
I suppose it depends on your perspective, right?
Fair.
Okay, so you reported in 101st. You can skip past that because you're already so you showed up your first unit. So are you in a leadership position? Because when you get to an aviation unit, and you'll tell us all about this, you may go straight into a pilot slot, or you may go be an ops guy and work on a staff for a while or whatever. So which track did you take?
So I ended up as an assistant operations officer in 2017. So 3 shop life for about, I want to say like 6-7 months when I first got there and got in process and everything. And I mean, you still have, like every aviator, as soon as you're a qualified pilot and you're in an aviation unit, you're going to have a required hour minimum, and you get folded into the aircrew training program or ATP of the unit, and so they put you on a progression to make you RL1 and you get you up to speed, and you're still flying, and you kind of have to balance that with your other duties. It's not down at the line in a platoon per se, but I was still able to kind of get my my flight fix there, despite being an OPSO. And I mean, I had a pretty cool job as an assistant operations officer, as kind of a land and ammunition manager, and dealing with the working with the training NCO for a lot of the stuff that I was doing, and working on special projects and stuff like that. And as a lieutenant in a pretty I don't know, our unit was or seemed overstaffed with lieutenants at the time, so it was kind of easy to be a gray man and not be right in the face of the XO or the SCO to get all the hate. But
I experienced a little bit of that, not as an aviator, but you report to a unit as a second lieutenant. You assume, well, I must be on a fast track to get down to a line unit, because that's the thing. And somebody else has other plans for you, and you go do a little bit of staff time first. It can come off as very patronizing at the time, and when people are saying, look, I know this isn't glorious or fun, you'll learn a lot here that will benefit you later on down the line as a lieutenant, when you learn how this stuff works on the backside, and you roll your eyes and say, yeah, that's patronizing, thanks a lot. But I know in my experience that actually turned out to be true. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it gave me some time to get a pulse on how things were running, and what I needed to do to be a better platoon leader when I got the opportunity. And it definitely gave me the ability to start forming those relationships within the higher level of the unit, to know who to go to for X, Y, or Z when you're down at a platoon and need some help from somebody for something. So I think it was good.
So when did you get to a platoon?
I want to say, so I showed up December of 2013 to 2017. It was probably, I want to say, April, May time frame of 2014 when I finally got a platoon, and basically fell into Alpha Company as the first platoon leader in 217 Cav. And I guess once I got down there, at the time they hadn't republished sort of the divestiture timeline or what everything was, but I know that 217 had gotten back from their last Afghanistan push, I want to say the summer before I showed up. So everybody that was still in the unit and had wasn't going to PCS or wasn't going anywhere else was there kind of getting ready to close things up. And so in that last year as a platoon leader, my primary focus was, I think, managing the disposition of a lot of our equipment while still maintaining our flying hour program, and just being ready for anything else.
Getting ready to shutter the doors.
Yeah, but I think we were also balancing some other things that as the 101st could have potentially been pulled into, whether or not they would have changed the Kiowa timeline at that point. Was at least to me at that level, it seemed kind of up in the air. But again, as a second lieutenant or almost first lieutenant at that point, you probably don't have a whole lot of visibility on the Army's bigger priorities.
It just does what it's told.
And at that point, from the time that I selected 58s, I was thinking that, okay, the 101st isn't going to actually get rid of the aircraft or isn't going to have a mission. We're still going to keep flying until probably 2017 was the projection at that point, and going through flight school in 13 or in 12, 13, that seemed far enough off that you could get through your first duty station and all that time and potentially a company command as a Kiowa guy, so it didn't seem that bad for me. But showing up to the 101st and 217 and all that stuff just continued to kind of accelerate, and it accelerated to the point where my unit had our last like farewell flight in the Kiowa, I want to say spring or late spring, early summer of 2015.
Yeah, so they pushed it up by about 2 years.
At least 2 years.
Yeah. So I was a staff officer standing on a helipad in Camp Red Cloud in Area 1 of Korea. This would have been in early 2017, and the CG and the DCSM got picked up. Not in the 58, but the 58 had an escort that the UH-60 and came and got them, and they took off in that. And I was told that's the last liftoff for Warrior 6 that's ever going to happen here in this theater, because the 58s that was basically the last one.
Yeah,
and Korea was last. Korea's kind of its very own thing. I was told it was the last in the Army to still have its 58s, and so I actually stood there and watched the last takeoff. So yeah, very, very cool. So you're Fort Campbell, your divestiture is going down. What is your training and or deployment timeline looking like, or operationally, what's going on?
So operationally, we're still kind of in the mix of JRTC rotations and supporting the other elements of the 101st that were getting ready to go and do their rotations. And so as a platoon leader, I got 2 full JRTC rotations under my belt, which built a lot of flight time and exposure to the I guess platoon level tactics as a Kiowa pilot. Whether or not I was going to get to use them, it was good to actually employ the aircraft as we were sort of designed to. One of the rotations was kind of the typical coin fight, and then the other one that we went back to went back to the straight like armor fight and everything that we would expect if we were going to
the more conventional.
Yeah, exactly, a more conventional fight. So
we've now gone back to the large scale combat operations is what we're calling it now.
Yeah, so getting to see sort of like both sides of the mission and employment of that aircraft was cool for me.
Cool.
Okay, so you do 2 JRTC rotations, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but at some point, I assume you talked to a 160th recruiter?
So being there at Fort Campbell, I was definitely, it was something that was on my radar. Okay. It was kind of, I'm going to rewind a couple years to, I guess, the summer between my Yuck and Cow year at West Point, where one of our summer requirements that everybody has to do is called CTLT, which is basically a month-long internship where...
Cadet troop leadership training or something like that.
I think you got it right. It's basically an internship where you as a cadet get to go shadow a platoon leader in the Army somewhere. At the time, like they had a process, or we're kind of trialing something where you could be selected or try to get a CTLT opportunity with a SOF unit. And so I was looking into all those opportunities. I knew that I wanted to do something shadowing an aviation platoon leader, and there were a couple opportunities with the 160th, and so somehow got pulled into one of those and went to 3 160 and observed a platoon leader there and sort of what they did on their day-to-day basis. So at that point, getting to see everything they were doing there and some of the stateside TDYs and stuff that they were on, I was like, yeah, this is where I want to be. Like, one day it's going to be my mission to get here.
For people unfamiliar or were unable to pick it up through implication, the 160th is what?
So the 160th or 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment is the Army's Special Operations unit that basically supports all of the SOF units across the Army, the Marines, Navy, and the Air Force as well, with respect to
the joint
their missions. So everything that one of those units does, if it has aviation as a part of its scheme of maneuver, we're probably going to be involved somehow.
And the 160th, generally doesn't have enough lift to do, and this is something that I've been instructing and teaching on for years, but the 160th doesn't really do logistics. They mostly just support getting special operations operators to and from an objective, being able to shoot their way in and out of something. Most of the rest of the logistics that takes place is conventional aviation. So it's a very important partnership that the special operations units have with the conventional units to their left and the right. It's critical.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you're shadowing this platoon leader with 3 160, right? Was there a specific event or person you met or something where you said, that's it, this is where I want to be?
I don't know that there was a specific person or an event, but it was really just the general, I guess, op tempo at the unit, and everybody's always coming and going back and forth. They were the sponsor that I had when I first got there. He was getting ready to rotate, in a week or two of me being there, and hand me off to basically the place or the person that he was replacing, coming back on a C-17 rotator that. Getting experience with different sponsors and everybody across that unit that was coming and going.
So it was more of a cumulative.
Yeah,
of all the different experiences and everything that was going on. And
exactly.
Okay.
It was
It makes sense.
Perfect. All right, let's take a little break, and then when we come back, we'll get into the 160th.
All right, sounds great.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay, we're back. So you're at Campbell, and your air wing, or your group, your Kiowa group is being shut down.
The squadron,
Yes.
Getting ready to case the colors.
Yep. And how did that go down?
So I started to think about what was going to be next for me. As I figure out what I wanted to do or how I wanted to fill the rest of my time as a first lieutenant at Fort Campbell is my first duty station, and typically the window that they recommend people apply to the 160th or to the special operations pipeline is after your company command time or after you're done with the captain's career course and you've had a full rotation or first full duty station, and you've got 500 plus hours as a pilot and pilot in command time, as well. And so I was still sort of shy of a lot of those marks, but being already at Campbell and having the 160th there right across the airfield and at least some exposure based on my time during CTLT, it was sort of one of those things that I know you get 3 chances, I might as well think about at least dropping an application, and if they tell me no big deal, got 2 more shots and can strategically place them the rest of my career, just depending on how things were going. But at the time with the divestiture to the Kiowa and the structuring of the cabs at Campbell at the time, I had a couple of friends in 717, which was our other Kiowa squadron at Fort Campbell, who they had kind of started to wind the 159th down a little bit ahead of the time that 217 was getting ready to case our colors. And so a lot of those guys that I knew, either from flight school or being in similar 58 classes in flight school, were either on division staff as lieutenants, and they weren't flying because their ATPs kind of went away with the 159 and that unit going away. Other people got pulled up to, or I guess back to Fort Rucker early, or got pulled down to Fort Rucker to start a transition course to either the Apache
different
or
aircraft,
kind of needs of the Army for a different airframe. And so being in that sort of time window with the what people are doing and everything like that, there wasn't like a guaranteed direction that sounded appealing to me, really. I mean, it was all kind of like a luck of the draw, and who knew who where, or what people thought, you would be best suited for,
there wasn't really something that you had direct control over.
No, like there was zero control. And from that, I viewed the opportunity to, throw an application out there is probably like the only way to have any degree of influence on, what I tried or wanted to do.
You said that you were a little shy of some of the requirements, be it flight hours or command time or career course or whatever. How shy for some of them?
For a lot of those, so I was probably right at 450 hours of time in the Kiowa. I'd probably flown as a pilot in command for about 6-7 months at that point. Had 150 hours as a pilot in command in that airframe, which was probably a little bit closer to like what they would like to see in that regard, but still the total time was short. I was still a first lieutenant, had only been at Campbell for maybe 2 years, or not quite 2 years when I submitted the application, and wasn't at a point where I was even promotable to captain yet. And so in that regard, from the professional career timeline standpoint, was definitely I would say disadvantaged from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, the flight requirements, you were actually closer probably than other applicants.
I mean, maybe it just sort of depends on how much people are flying in their ATPs. 500 hours is probably what a lot of people hope to be able to leave their first duty station with, is like a total flight number hour. Not everybody makes pilot in command, but the ones that fly enough and are really focused on it generally don't have a problem there. But that's not a hard and fast requirement until you get to be a company commander of an aviation company, and you have to make pilot in command within 6 months, and that's really the only place that as a commissioned officer comes into play. Now when you're talking about a warrant officer, it's a little bit different, because as a warrant, your only job really is flying the aircraft and being a competent aviator, and you have other ancillary duties too, but nothing that supersedes your ability to fly the aircraft.
Okay, so you turned in your application. Did you have any expectations? Were you expecting acceptance, expecting rejection?
So I quite honestly just figured, I threw it out there. It's a long shot, but if I hear anything back that's not like, no, we don't want to, consider you at any point,
as long as they're not laughing in your face.
Yeah, as long as they're not slamming the door shut in my face and laughing about it, then to me it would have been fine. I would have continued with my career, and probably ended up going back to the Rucker and the captain's career course and get whatever transition they hand me, and carrying on from there. But it was timed, I think, just right for me. I submitted the application early 2015, heard back maybe a month or two later, and they're like, we're interested in if you want to assess with us. So they pulled me in for an assessment. I assessed in, I think it was April of 2015.
This is Green Platoon?
So no, this isn't Green Platoon. Yeah, this was before Green Platoon.
Okay.
I assessed in April of 2014, and somehow ended up making it through the assessment to the board on Thursday at the end of this week-long process, and somehow got brought back into the room, and they gave me the news that they were gonna offer me a slot as a 47 pilot. So that was pretty exciting for me. Still was kind of in shock, but that sort of started the next phase in my aviation career.
Yeah, so be a CH-47 Chinook?
MH-47.
It's MH.
MH-47.
It's once they're modified.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But yes, the Chinook.
Yeah, correct.
So because you're at Campbell, that seems like it would be pretty simple. You were just walking down the street, right?
Yeah, pretty much, out processed 217 in the coming weeks, and then in processed right across the street, past their additional entry control point to the compound. And, essentially from my assessment date to the date that I started Green Platoon, or started that actual 47 transition, was inside of a month.
Tell everybody what you're allowed to say about Green Platoon.
It's really, a multi phase course, depending on the airframe that you're selected to fly, that you essentially take care of about 6 months worth of mission training on that new platform, all of the additional bells and whistles that those helicopters have that differentiate them from a regular Army Black Hawk or Chinook, or even a more special platform that the Army didn't fly anymore, being the Little Bird. And there are a couple of different phases, like I would say your basic like officer green platoon or OGP is kind of like combat skills. It's maybe 3-4 weeks of advanced land nav and medic training and firearm skills and combatives, and then all the pilots kind of go from there. Like that OGP portion is the green platoon that everybody always says is what makes somebody a Night Stalker. And for everybody that's not a pilot, that's definitely true, because they finish that 4 weeks and go straight into their staff job or whatever other function, and go to work from there. But all the pilots still have a basic navigation flight course and a actual mission aircraft qualification course to go through before they are formally or really truly become Night Stalkers.
So here's a question. We've had a pair of Green Berets on, and one of them had also been in Ranger Regiment. So I'm familiar with how assessment and selection works for each of the respective branches, and also how RASP, RIP, whatever they're calling it now for Ranger Regiment, it's their own regimental internal assessment and selection program. If you don't pass those, they show you the door and you go off to either the 82nd or whatever is the next thing for you if you're here at Fort Bragg. Liberty. If you don't pass Green Platoon, what do they do with you?
So if you don't pass Green Platoon as an officer, you just kind of get shown back to whatever unit you came from.
So you duffel bag drag back to the 101st.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you put back into wherever you came from. Like there isn't. I mean, it's not exactly like you get recirculated into a pool of like needs of the Army kind of thing. Like some of those other selection processes, where that differs is, I think, for the enlisted or EGP, enlisted Green Platoon side of things. So all of the people that are coming in and trying to be non-rated crew members or NCOs within the organization that are coming from a different MOS or different space in the Army, they probably get cut different orders and sent,
like your flight medics and stuff like
that. Yeah, similar process, but it's not quite as I think harsh as some of those other selection opportunities that exist.
What were some of the differences as you're training up on the Chinook? What were some of the more noticeable differences, other than obviously size?
Yeah, you went from one of the smallest to the biggest. So.
Basically from the smallest regular aircraft in the Army inventory to the biggest. As far as handling capabilities, things like that. I mean, it's still a helicopter, so the controls function kind of the same way. Like if you can fly in one thing, you can jump in the other one, and
really, it's interchangeable.
It's not directly interchangeable, but from the pilot perspective, if you're cognizant of how much bigger you are, and some of the other things that differ. I think the hardest adjustment for me was going from being a crew of two, so you and a co-pilot, sometimes even like the ability to be a single pilot in the Kiowa, to an aircraft where you have yourself, a co-pilot, at least a flight engineer, and sometimes up to an additional 3-4 crew chiefs. So you have 6-7 people on the same ICS system or your communications to one another, and it can be a little bit interesting trying to figure out when and where you need to insert yourself and what you're trying to say, and not step on everybody else on the aircraft if you're trying to clear obstacles or maneuver a certain way versus you and your co-pilot, and you pretty much have field or a 360 degree field of view of the entire aircraft in the space that you're operating in, whereas in the Chinook you've got maybe the you know, 180 degrees, if not maybe a little
if you're
bit
lucky,
more. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just figured that different aircraft would be.
I mean, from a systems perspective, it's definitely a lot more complex. Like, you have a lot more to worry about with respect to, you know, being hydraulically actuated flight controls and, you know, everything with going at and having, you know, a single transmission and a single rotor system to a tandem rotor system with 5 transmissions. You know, all the different emergency procedures and limits and everything that you memorize as a pilot that are associated with the additional equipment and limitations. So that's definitely something that differentiated the experience, but it's you know, totally different mission and mindset as well.
Okay.
So what's your first major training and experience and or deployment? Kind of what comes first?
So getting through Green Platoon and that process was about, you know, 6 months for me. Finished the final portion of that, which is kind of like a TDY or a culminating exercise where you do your you get your a couple of trips for your overwater qualifications as well as your desert mountain or high altitude qualifications. And sort of coming back from the desert mountain phase is when everybody does their final check ride, and essentially, you know, you pass that with a check pilot that comes from generally the gaining unit in the organization. You know, maybe a standard instructor pilot or a standardization pilot that comes and, you know, as long as you pass that, you kind of get pulled into the organization, get to wear your Maroon Beret and be a proper member of whichever battalion you end up going to.
At some point, you've been to airborne school?
So I did airborne school as a cadet.
As a cadet as well?
Yeah.
I kind of assumed that. So, okay. So you have to do your basic refresher and then you're good. So
yeah, pretty much.
All right. But you haven't jumped since you were a cadet?
No, I hadn't jumped since I was a cadet, and I actually never jumped at the 160th. As a pilot, once you're you know, qualified aviator, even if you're going to an airborne unit, the only time that you're likely going to be jumping is as a commander. So I think the company commander slots within all of the I think the headquarters and company as well as the flight companies, the commanders were the only ones that were really in an airborne slot.
Okay.
And had to maintain jump status.
A paid parachutist position.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, it seems like an unnecessary risk to be putting your highly, you know, I get it.
Once the Army spent, you know, $2 million training you to be a pilot, it's
just to go
break your leg and not be qualified to fly anymore.
I've jumped out of 160th 47s before. It's fun.
I mean, I've flown plenty of jump ops, but
yeah, it's good stuff. So okay, so your first training and or deployment after Green Platoon, you're where?
So that ended up being a operational sort of, I guess we call them JSETs. It was in
combined exchange training.
Exactly. I did about 2 months bouncing between Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, working with you know, both partner forces that we have there and organic U.S. SOF that were in the region. Real quick,
when did you do this? What time exactly?
So that was probably March, April, maybe April-May timeframe of 2016.
So this is a couple years after Putin's first incursion into Ukraine. So we're ramping up our soft presence in soft, I should say, in Ukraine at this point, and the rest of the Baltic states and Poland as well. So that's kind of the
strategic
operational environment we're in at this point. So yeah, okay.
When you're over there in Poland, Lithuania, working with the partner nations, what were you doing with them?
So it was honestly just a lot of training exercises and being able to do systems and aircraft familiarizations and, you know, mission profile qualifications, whether it be like fast roping or rappelling ops or some other CAPEX type validations with respect to Yeah.
So were you flying their aircraft, or were you flying some of their forces around? I mean,
it was a sort of a mix of both. I mean, we take our equipment over, and everything we do is based on our mission profiles, and a lot of it's our soft units that are over there as the embed or embedded force, doing a lot of the familiarizations and working side by side with the partner forces and working to establish their qualifications and familiarity with our missions, and being able to work both with them and with elements of Army soft that were over there. But predominantly, like, a lot of our focus, at least in, it sort of depended on the country and the contacts we had in the certain areas. It was kind of like two different joint exercises going on at the same time that were had separate players, and were kind of split between the first and second half of the time that I was over there.
Atlantic Resolve is the big one that's going on, and for all of you and there's smaller ones.
Did you get to fly a lot of foreign aircrafts? Or I guess partner nation?
So never got to fly any partner nation aircraft or other profiles. As a 160th guy, you're pretty much only flying the aircraft you're qualled in, whether it be the 47, the 60, or the Little Bird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that comes down to risk. No commander's going to want to sign off on something like that. So for a JSET, a Joint Combined Exchange Training, it's often what we call a SME, so a subject matter exchange. By statute, we U.S. forces have to be the beneficiary of the exchange training. However, the other partner nation force gets to participate in and learn a lot as well. But we have to be the beneficiaries. That's how the funding stream for all that works. But it's a really amazing opportunity to partner with and meet really great professionals in our allied forces, and it's also a good there's the very hands-on benefit that we receive this training, but it's also a symbol that we're providing to the world that we are very closely enmeshed and partnered with these other nations in case anybody else happens to be watching. So good stuff.
And like, for me, in that experience, like, I was still a first lieutenant, and you hadn't pinned on captain yet, brand new to the unit. It was an eye-opening experience for me to get to see the level of capability of our own unit, as well as everything else we integrated into those experiences for all the players involved.
Okay, so how long were you in Europe?
Almost 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to be coming down on orders to go to the career course. Is that next?
So, funny enough, I guess that would have been about the time that I would have PCS from Campbell and gone back to Rucker for the career course. But having been pulled into the 160th in that environment, they were looking to be able to get a little bit of utilization out of me being there. Having been a pre-career course, kind of assessee and officer, they would typically hold on to you for at least 2-3 years, and sometimes a little bit longer, and find the right time to send you. So it wasn't one of those things for me that was imminent. I would say, like, it was definitely in the plan, within the coming years, but not within the first couple of months of being there.
Sorry, I'm laughing because, Dan, utilization is the Army officer term for they're going to get their money's worth out of it.
I'm familiar with the concept.
So back to Campbell.
Yeah, so initially when I assessed, they were going to send me to 4th Battalion, which is up at JBLM. Knowing that, like, 4th Battalion was interesting. Like, I wanted to stay at Campbell. I just bought a house. It was one of the places, like, I viewed it as being like, you're closer to the flagpole, so you might have better opportunities and be part of a different mission set, if you will, if you're right there with all of the tier 1 elements of the unit. And for me, I think that I had run into like I guess when I was in flight school, I ran into a W3 at the 160th, and had kind of developed a relationship with him, and he was my only contact with within the organization that told me like, yeah, you need to try and stay at Campbell. That'll give you better opportunities and a little bit more flexibility, and it's where everything that they're doing is pretty cool right now. So he pulled some strings and got me to 2nd Battalion, which is the only battalion at Campbell that has Chinook companies, and ended up staying there in one of those companies.
Okay. It shows, particularly in the special operations world, having a good reputation and having people that trust you can go a long way when it comes to where you go and where you
absolutely
don't go.
Yeah,
it's a very small world.
Relationships matter, and who can definitely make or break that.
I think that's true across pretty much every aspect of life.
Of course,
regardless of the nature of your profession.
Of course, that's true. Okay, so you land in one of those Chinook battalion, squadron.
So it's a Chinook company.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, probably much smaller. And then
how many Chinooks are in a company? Or I guess a better question would be, how do they break down the aircraft into platoon, company, squadron sizes?
So you really have the helicopters that are kind of more at the company level. How a unit decides to hand receipt everything out or structure them in terms of property accountability is, kind of a different way of approaching it depending on who you talk to. But at least within our battalion, you have a couple of companies, a Chinooks, a company of Blackhawks, and then
but support. How many Chinooks would be in a company?
You generally have between 8 and 12.
8 and 12, okay. And then going back to when you were with the Kiowa, how many Kiowas would be in a platoon?
So we had, I want to say, 4 Kiowas in a platoon. 4 or 5 Kiowas in a platoon.
Okay.
It's structured very differently, man. Yeah.
And again, like back to the 58 unit, we were one of the first companies or squadrons that brought in a UAV company and had the man-unmanned teaming aspect of that mission set. And so when you had the MQ-7s and that additional platform or airframe within the squadron footprint, it changed the total number of helicopters the squadron had down from I think 30 to maybe 21. And then your however many I think MQ-7s or MQ-9s we had at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about that period of time you were prior to the career course?
So I actually never did the career course.
Okay.
It was one of those things. It was probably a couple of years of my future. But ended up doing my time, the 160th, spent I guess as soon as I got back from Europe on that operational rotation, I promoted, was a captain, and then got pushed down to the company level. Went from filling a XO position at the headquarters company for 2nd Battalion down to a platoon leader position. Filled that role for a good bit of time, then kind of bounced around and did OPSO time at the company, and then also XO time at the company, which is kind of interesting how everything is structured both on paper and your OERs and
right.
The op tempo of the unit, and depending on where people are and who's on assumption of command orders, and you kind of balance the cadence and responsibilities that you get tasked with as a company, and you juggle everything between the commander and maybe 2 or 3 captains that are in the company at a time,
and whoever's profile can support this, that, and the other thing. I get it
exactly. And I mean, we were a unit that were always definitely not 100% manned at any given point, so you have slots for 4 captains and a major company commander, but you might only have 2 or 3 captains, and you're splitting a couple of platoon leader responsibilities, an officer responsibility, and an XO responsibility across that number of people. And one of you's forward deployed while somebody else on else is on a TDY, and somebody's manning it down back at the house.
Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of stuff going on.
The Army goes rolling along, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I did all my time there from finishing Groom Platoon in early 2016 through my motorcycle accident in 2018, just kind of rowing the boat, if you will. Deployed to Iraq a couple of times, had some time in Syria and, sprinkled in there, and kind of sat some of the National Mission Authority responsibility time as well. But everything else within that time at the 160th was relatively uneventful in terms of the hairiness of anything that I did.
I'm trying to think of the time when you were in Iraq. That was OIR. Check me on the dates on that.
That was OIR. Kind of like the very beginning.
Inherent resolve.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So both 2 of the deployments to Iraq were out of BDSC, and doing a lot of north-south routes and ring routes and stuff. Nothing super exciting there. With one of the last deployments being to the northern part of Iraq with some spicy time in 2017, but other than that, nothing too crazy.
So the motorcycle crash. This is a pivotal moment. Will you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually in the process of getting ready to go downrange early summer, and this was, I guess, April of 2018. Just one of my Friday nights, kind of cruising around, finally warm enough to be out on the bike in Clarksville, Tennessee, and decided to take the long way home after leaving work, and ended up getting T-boned going straight through an intersection in town. Life flighted from Clarksville down to Nashville, and spent 8-9 weeks inpatient at Vanderbilt, having a lot of trauma to my left leg. Ultimately had, I think, 10 surgeries there. Had a moderate TBI and some other road rash and upper body injuries as a result of the accident. And that really sort of started the, next phase, or the final phase of my Army career, if you will. As soon as I, was stabilized at the Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, it was definitely a rocky road with respect to my state at that point, just being on so many pain meds and in and out of a washout or a clean out surgery here or there. The injury itself was a degloving issue where my tibia and fibula were broken probably about 2-3 inches above the ankle. Very, very messy break, and my knee was lacerated open and kind of, I wouldn't say completely severed, but it was peeled all the way back to the point where all of the bone and everything in my lower leg was exposed and open to probably the not so clean intersection and sand and debris and everything like that you get in a busy intersection in a downtown part of a city like Clarksville, where I'm sure there are plenty of dirty needles floating around, but nonetheless it made for a lot of debridements and stabilization surgery, and trying to put things back together and sew it up, and doing limb salvage surgeries to the point where I think my last one at Vanderbilt was a 14 or 15 hour surgery with complex donor flaps and skin procedures to be able to, I guess, replace the skin that had been, just died and become necrotic at that point.
Right.
And still kind of a, hairy situation with respect to in and out of possible infection and everything else like that at that point.
So at this point, they're confident they can still salvage your limb at this point.
So at this point, I really wasn't in a mind like able to make any sort of medical decisions at that point, because I was just so clouded from all the drugs and the TBI, and I don't have a clear memory of a lot of that time at least early on in the hospital. There are bits and pieces here or there, but a lot of it goes back to the accounts from my mom, who was actually really the constant person there with me the majority of that time.
Who's a retired nurse?
She was still an operating room nurse at that point in time, and she was there making a lot of my medical decisions for me. Right. So, I mean, according to her, they had thought that they were going to have to amputate it, but if they were, it was going to be an above the knee or a through knee type of amputation. And I think she just, was a big advocate for, sticking with the salvage as long as they possibly could. And, things, continue to trend that direction. And it ended up being the right thing to do, I think, in that situation. Even though I later went on to have an amputation, it's certainly not as bad as it would have been if they had just, done it right then.
Okay.
About how long was that whole process?
So the whole process, for me medically, I had the inpatient stay those first 9 weeks. Then I got flown out to San Antonio when the best course of action was to kind of follow on care at the Center for the Intrepid. They're out of BAMC.
I know it well.
And so went to San Antonio and went to a month-long inpatient rehab at the VA there, just to be able to kind of get some degree of livelihood back, because I've been on my back or seated in a hospital for the last 2 months and didn't really I think I lost 30-40 pounds.
You're going through all the muscle degeneration.
And was just in a rough spot with respect to my mental state. Everything else that at that point in time was not optimal. I had to figure out how to manage everything for myself again, and that was a process. But got out the early summer from the hospital and went to live in the barracks at Fort Sam Houston, and follow-on care, a couple of additional surgeries to continue with the salvage process. And my entire knee had been reconstructed, and at this point when I arrived to San Antonio, I maybe had 30, I think that would be an optimistic projection, 30 degree range of motion in my knee. So still not, walking on crutches everywhere, in a wheelchair, etc. So it was, a lot to be done with respect to the rehab side of things, and regaining that motion and ability to bear weight on that left leg. And went through a couple more surgeries, and unfortunately had a surgical site infection in one of the procedures above my knee that led to a road on antibiotics for a number of months, and a couple other procedures and continued rehab, and unfortunately I think that the 3-month round of antibiotics for that surgical site infection sort of masked an issue with my broken tibia that may have manifested a little bit earlier, but ultimately when I came off of those antibiotics, I had another sinus that popped open and drained down there that indicated another possible issue, and so had that cultured and looked at, and x-rays at the about 8-9 month mark post my accident showed that the tibia hadn't really healed or completed the refusion process, even though it was stabilized with a titanium rod, and that was causing a lot of pain and problems with being fully weight bearing. And they culture that stuff, and immediately they're like, okay, it's MRSA, and osteomyelitis is definitely a process where if you want to keep going down the salvage route, you're looking at probably year at least, if not 2 years, plus maybe even a little bit more, with more medical procedures and pulling the hardware out, treating the infection, regrowing all of the bone, and all of this stuff that was like, man, this does not sound like the quality of life I want to have, or what I want to deal with after, being in and out of hospitals for the last, 8-9 months. And, December of 2018 is when I decided, like, this isn't for me. Let's just, do it right now and have a better quality of life. Prosthetics and the technology with everything where it is now is at a point where I knew that, I would be much happier in life going that route, as opposed to never being able to run or, potentially walk normally again if I continue down the salvage route.
So obviously the first few months you're on all sorts of pain medication and the TBI and everything, so you're not really in a mentally functional state. Should we
definitely
call it?
Not a clear state of mind.
Yeah.
No.
At what point did you start thinking about, like, oh crap, what's this going to do to my career? I mean, do you remember? So
there were definitely parts of it that were, I had thought about it. One of the first people that had visited me in the hospital, was he's now a retired CW5, but he was a warrant officer in the 160th, and he had a similar motorcycle accident in Fort Campbell. Ended up as a baloney amputee and was one of, or if not the first, aviator or Army aviator to return to full flight status as an amputee. And so having met him and, had or really hearing his experience and the way that he pioneered that pathway really inspired me and made me think that it was going to be possible for me, whether I ended up as an amputee or whether I pursued continued salvage, that it was going to be possible to get back on flight status and continue my career and my time at the regiment necessarily wouldn't have ended there. I think that all along I was thinking that it was my goal to return to duty and to stay in the Army as long as I possibly could and continue flying. Even though I was a commissioned officer, I saw the writing on the wall, like I was gonna have to go to Bullock at some point and go take a command, and those were things that I wanted to do. But ultimately, I first and foremost wanted to be a pilot and had planned, if I had allowed my career to progress to that point, to give up my commission and be a warrant officer, staying at the 160th, just
to continue flying,
flying and make that the focus of my career.
Well, I mean, that was your whole purpose for joining.
Exactly. It was to fly, and like that would have been, to me at the time, what I viewed as a career success.
Yeah.
The decision to go ahead and amputate, was that a gradual kind of eureka type moment, or was it more of a, I'm done with this?
I mean, I think I knew it was always, a possibility just based on, where I was, the rehabilitation community that, I was working in, and, the number of people that were there as former limb salvage patients who elected for an amputation for pain or continual issues with the salvage. It was always going to be a possibility or an option, but one of those things that I didn't want to have to exercise until it was, absolutely like clear. And for me, the infection and the issue with MRSA, having been through the infection once already, or like another strain of MRSA, I realized that, it's likely that, once you've, had that experience or been infected that way, like, your likelihood
you're more susceptible to it.
It's a lot higher, no matter what, even if you don't have any hardware. So it's made me, especially now, even, extra vigilant when it comes to things that, not feeling totally right or having, pain or, fluid collections in certain areas. Like it's just one of those things that's always sort of in my mind now. But for me, that was definitely like a light switch, is like, that's what I need. Like it's going to be the right decision for me. I know that there's no way to, reverse anything like that, but it's the thing for me that it was a, pretty clear decision.
So you make the decision, you have the procedure. I assume that's done in one procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you have the one major procedure. When you finally come to, that there's no turning back on this. So what is your decision next? I mean, I know there's got to be some rehabilitation in store. So
yeah, so it was December 2018. I made the decision, had the procedure in January of 19. So I, had a couple moments with family and everything like that to, think about it and talk about it, and it was still pretty clear for me. And made the progression post amputation to the 6 to 8 week mark where everything's healed, and to the point where you can start training and wearing a prosthetic, and you start to work with a prosthetist to get fit and get everything that you would need from that perspective, and learning how to walk again. And for me, it was a painful but relatively quick process. I think it was far easier and I say far easier, but a more straightforward recovery and rehabilitation process for me than my previous, trying to regain some of the knee range of motion and weight bearing and strengthening my leg and everything like that. I think training in the prosthetic and just the act of forcing myself to wear it and walk and continue to increase the distances and what I was doing and trying to do in it gave me that confidence that what I did was right. And it's a multi-month process, but it fell in place.
So while you're going through all this, are you still down in San Antonio at the Intrepid
No, I was
in BAMC?
I was still in San Antonio, so I had initially gotten out there June of 2018. By December, when I had elected for the amputation, I was kind of at the point where, living out of a suitcase there in San Antonio, it was getting a little bit old for me. Trying to figure out a way
gets that way pretty quick.
Yeah, trying to figure out a way to get back to some semblance of regular
home,
life. Yeah, like home as quickly as possible. And for me, the way that I saw that with how my recovery and everything was going was probably the best opportunity to ask for a PCS to put me in San Antonio, so that I could have a little bit more than just the suitcase life for a little bit while I was focusing on recovery. So I ended up getting PCS'd out there,
and they put you at Fort Sam.
Mm-hmm.
So you were PCS to a medical unit?
I went from the 160th and being assigned to 2nd Battalion to being assigned to the Warrior Training.
The WTB, right?
WTB there at Fort Sam Houston.
The Warrior Transition Battalion.
Yep. And so I went there knowing that I was giving up a lot of the freedoms or accommodations that I had as a somebody that was there TDY from a SOCOM unit, and I did that knowing that it was ultimately going to help me focus on all of the recovery gates that I had to meet and be able to try and get back on full duty status and potentially go back to flying. And ultimately it was a process. It probably took 6 months for me to be walking in a prosthetic before I felt totally confident or would have been able to go out and run and try and start demonstrating all of the physical tasks or skills that I would need to as an amputee, and that's really when I leaned into some of the activities or extracurriculars that I thought would help me sort of get back there, whether it be competitive shooting and doing long road marches or other stuff like that, just trying to get back in shape to get back at it, and continue to progress down that route. That first year being an amputee, and then I guess it was probably month 9 or 10 into that journey that I started to have some discomfort and realized that potential setback in the medical arena again with respect to how my residual limb was feeling, and the way that they had done the amputation. Because of the infection the first time around, they had elected to just cut straight through the titanium rod that was in my tibia, and shape the bone and everything around it and then close it up without totally removing it, because they didn't want to have to remove it from the top and pull the rod from a area where they had the confirmed infection through healthy bone and potentially spread the infection. So, I was good with that. Figured it sounded right to me, and let them do what they did best as medical professionals. And unfortunately, whatever had happened with the infection the first time around, it's extremely difficult to kill any of those germs on the hardware. And so, ended up having another bout of MRSA as a result of the hardware that was left over.
Once you have it once.
And they ended up going back, doing a revision almost a year to the day after my first amputation. So that was my 17th and still last surgery that I had as a result of the accident, was that revision procedure. Took all of the hardware out of the leg and everything. But this time around, it was a little bit quicker, kind of getting back into the prosthetic and feeling, a little bit more on top of things. And there wasn't the same learning curve that there was the first time around. But this time, you have COVID, because this was January of 2020 that, ended up having the revision. And about the time, actually like 3 weeks after I, started wearing the prosthetic again, after that 6-8 week mark being post-op from the revision, they shut everything down, and I wasn't able to go and actually
February-March time
have in-person appointments to get the prosthetic care that I needed following my surgery, and continue with rehab and everything like that. And it's like the entire world, and especially the hospital communities, all shut down because they were so focused on that. So that's sort of where I got to with respect to my medical journey, April 2018 to sort of May 2020. That 2-year period looks, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of progress made with respect to my trying to get back to, duty and coming back and being able to fly again. But it's just the nature of the medical setbacks that I dealt with, and any number of the other things that tested my resilience and will to continue service at that point. And unfortunately, hit 2020, and I was all of a sudden at almost 8 years time in service, hadn't commanded, hadn't gone to the career course. And so I was starting to see the writing on the wall with respect to okay, if I had any hope of being able to go back and take command in a unit, like an operational aviation unit, and get back to flying, my window was getting pretty short. And just with COVID, the way everything was kind of going at that point in time, that's really about the time that I decided to accept my fate and progress forward with the MEB and go through that process to kind of figure out what was the medical evaluation board. And kind of see what their shake was going to be and what their recommendation was. And, ultimately I sort of knew what the result was going to be. And, given my timeline, what I wanted to do, everything that I had thought about, it's time to go back to the drawing board and figure out, what could I do next after my time in the uniform is up.
Okay. Before we get to that point, you ended up spending a lot of time there at the Intrepid Center and BAMC, and then the Warrior Transition Battalion. Obviously, you're going to have scheduled medical appointments, checkups, physical therapy, treatments, what have you. You've gone through a traumatic physical experience that is ongoing because of setbacks, infections. MRSA, for anybody who has not had it, is a physical nightmare, and it never goes away. You're more and more susceptible to it. But so you having it three times. Three times. Congratulations on still being here. You've been through a lot in that yearish time since your accident, physically, and then you're with all these setbacks and infections and all these other demotivating factors. What sort of mental, spiritual, counseling? What options were made available? Did you take advantage of them? I mean, you've got to be going through a lot.
So, I mean, I guess coming to the Center for the Intrepid, that was part of the reason why, I felt like it was the right decision for me to PCS out there and be there so I could have all of those resources available to me. And on staff at that center, they had a psychiatrist, doing performance counseling sessions, and probably sat down with them at least once a month, just kind of make sure that everything was, good with respect to like the way I was feeling. Like whenever you're assigned to a WTB, there's a requirement for you to see a psychologist and sit down and talk and just, make sure that, there isn't anything else that they need to address. And, fortunate to have all of those people and have those opportunities to, talk and sort of vent both about like my, state and what I was thinking about, and just making sure that like, it wasn't getting locked away somewhere and compounding to bigger issues. And, fortunately there wasn't anything that, was identified as a tremendous stressor or anything that I wasn't able to, work through on my own or overcome. But the whole experience and, all of the stuff medically that I've been through or through the military and the assessment selection processes and everything like that, if there was anything that cumulatively my time in the military, taught me and really ingrained, was the resilience aspect and, the ability that, you can adapt and overcome no matter what the challenge may be or what, how crappy of cards you get dealt and whatever, life event or situations happen. Like it's not the end of the world. Right. And I think for me, like that was, even though I had access to, all of the mental health resources and anything else that, I could seek out on, in addition to those, I think, having the positive mindset and, continuing to, be, resilient in the course of everything and not allow myself to sort of spiral in any particular direction was, what I'll attribute my success to in that regard.
Okay.
So, taking into consideration the event that
right.
the accident, everything that's led us up to this point, we're going to ask you the same question that we ask every single guest, and that's: once you reached tracer burnout, did you leave on your own terms?
So when I got to that point, I definitely, was definitely ready to start the next chapter. And, from the time that I had accepted the MEB route as opposed to focusing on returning to duty, I think that was the transition point for me in terms of, okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this chapter and look forward to, what's next? What do I want to do? Since I've always been so focused on flying, what is going to be, fulfilling in some similar, way, shape, or form as I navigate my, career outside of the Army, and what is that going to look like? So, it was definitely a difficult or, seemed to be a interesting point in time where, at least as an officer, you feel like you're equipped from a standpoint of being a leader and pretty adaptable and resilient and able to do just about anything and take on any challenge and figure out a way to execute. It seemed like it might be a relatively easy thing to find at least something that you could be happy doing outside and a management type of career. But it was still one of those things that, coming from the aviation side of things and not knowing where I wanted to be or what I was going to be motivated to do, not being married or having a family at that point in time, it seemed like there was almost too much to consider and think about, that it took a little bit longer to find my way, if you will, as I was getting ready to leave than I imagined.
Okay. Knowing now how it all turned out, if you could go back, would you do it all again? go through the application process or nomination process for West Point?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I definitely would do all of that.
Even knowing the way it would end up turning out.
I mean, if I knew I was going to be sitting here and having gone through all of the medical stuff, debatable, but I think that I've had a good shake and a good ride so far, and don't know that I would, immensely change anything. I think there are, points and things along the way that I probably should have or should reconsider or think about a little bit harder. But I mean, all in all, I feel pretty content with how things ended up, and I'm happy where I am and kind of the trajectory I'm on right now, and everything that my time in service provided, both foundationally as a cadet to developmentally as a young officer, and even developing as an aviator, and arguably the world's greatest helicopter unit in existence. And it just is one of those that I can't say that there were any striking experiences that I do away with completely.
Okay, that's fair.
Do you have any parting shots you'd like to share with us before we wind down here? Any lessons that you've learned, any knowledge you'd like to impart?
Things that you've learned from your time in service that you've applied since the end of your service?
I think one of the things that I probably or that would have helped me as I got ready to get out of the military and sort of I hate to think of it as accepting that fate as much as being as in control as possible. I wish I would have taken a little bit more time to prepare myself and understand what options exist on the other side of things, and what are some of the things that I should have thought about in terms of my own satisfaction, fulfillment. What is it going to take, as opposed to being locked in, pedal to the metal, on one specific career field, and that being aviation. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's anything that I really should have or could have done differently or to be more proactive in that regard. I think that's the difference between just being totally immersed in the passion of a specific interest, and being committed to that. And I think that's a important mark of anybody that is going to be extremely successful or really committed to a particular career field. But I think it's possible to still continue that fulfillment outside of that, if you are able to find the niche and adapt quickly, which I feel like my military experience has helped with that for sure. Just with all of the different job sort of assignments that you're expected to excel in, and everything you're expected to be an expert in, and from that side of things, felt relatively prepared. But I would say it's probably important to consider life as like don't shut any like crazy doors behind you if it's an area that you think you might be interesting, or want to re-explore later on in life. And there are a couple opportunities that I can think of throughout my time in the military where I may have done that for one reason or another, because I just continue to want to get deeper and deeper in the world of aviation and focus solely on that, as opposed to maintaining or keeping certain relationships warm. And not that any of that has really come back to bite me. On this side of things, I think it would have been a little bit easier to make the transition that I did and be a little bit more focused on a career in business if I had maintained a lot of the close relationships that I had at West Point, that kind of end up getting cold as you add years and time in the military and become super focused in some other direction. But that's probably what I would say is maintaining, or I guess not losing focus on where you come from, or any of the.
Don't let your passion blind you to everything else.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Great way to end it.
Well, Josh, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I've learned a lot about rotary wing airframes.
And hopefully you'll never have to auto-rotate ever again. So.
Well, it's definitely on my plate to get back in the cockpit and get back and utilize some of those ratings that I still have. And, it's still very much a passion of mine, but something that, fortunately having to find something else professionally to dig into, and it's not bad on that front either, but I think it will always be a passion, just not the career.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great conversation.
All right. So, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Well, I really enjoy the discussion. Of course, first Army aviator we've had on there, so a very new perspective. Our first service academy.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot about the process of the nomination and all the kind of the backside process that goes on before you even show up to day one.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that West Point cadets show up the whole summer prior to when they start in the fall. And that's the first I've ever heard of that. So learned a lot. A lot of really great. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but a lot of really great lessons at the end. So,
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that this was great for anybody who maybe they themselves or maybe one of their children is thinking about going to a service academy.
Yeah.
Now maybe some of the things that you or your child should be looking at doing to kind of beef up their resume to get that nomination.
Yeah.
From their representatives. I was actually kind of surprised about how many people, I guess, made it through that initial process. He said they started with around 1,100, and then by the time, A-Day or A-Week, he called it, they'd only lost about 50. I would have thought that it probably would have been higher than that. But still, that says something for the nomination process, I guess.
I think he also said, and these aren't exact numbers, but come graduation 4 years later, I think he said they had about 1,000. So if we're just using these round numbers, I mean, that's about 100 total, and then 50 in that first tranche. So that's actually a higher, or let me rephrase, a lower attrition rate than I would have expected.
Yeah. I think that says something about the nomination process and the things that they're looking for in nominees. And maybe it also says something about the rigors of that first summer before school starts. And then, I mean, that losing an additional 50 throughout the course of 4 years of college, that's pretty minuscule considering the tomfoolery that college kids will
when you think about all the reasons that one could step away or be removed from the course. It could be anything from obviously criminal problems or drinking issues
or academic failures.
But oftentimes there's also just hardships where if somebody's family member.
Of course.
So it could be anything, but so.
But I mean, still across the course of 4 years to only lose about 50 for all those different possibilities. That's impressive.
I mean, it sounds to me like one of two things. Either, and I'm not advocating for this, but I'm saying either the standards throughout the course are very low or the nomination process is very tight. I would say it's probably the latter. So okay. Let's talk about his actual career as an aviator. So time in the 101st, what do you think about all that?
I had totally forgotten, and I've been retired for a few years now, but I had totally forgotten about the phase out of the Kiowa, which was one of my favorite helicopters as a young infantryman. Mm-hmm. We used them, I mean, throughout even just like the smallest training exercises, we'd have them whizzing overhead. Yeah. I love those things. Those things were awesome.
Very quick.
I had totally forgotten about the phase out.
Yeah, they're not fast in a sense of being an in a race, but they're very quick, which is what you would want in a reconnaissance.
Very nimble.
Something, I didn't bring it up during the discussion. You and I have joked around about this kind of stuff of like uniform changes, for example, but there's always that one last class that gets selected to do something or is the last one to get issued a piece of equipment immediately before a major transition. And it sounds to me like he was one of those, like, you are the last group of people that will ever get chosen to fly this airframe. By the way, there's a ticking clock on this. You know?
Well, remember Sid? Sid got trained up on the Dragon and then immediately got trained up on the Javelin.
On the Javelin immediately.
Which was replacing the Dragon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not quite the same, but similar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah, but somebody's always got to be that last
class, yeah. And, I mean, I guess especially you're expecting this to be your career field, and you're choosing. He chose that airframe.
Yeah.
And then he found out, like, well, it's going away in a few years. Of course, now he did say he thought that he had more time.
Yeah.
But they sped up the timeline for it. So I mean, you can't control that, especially as a newly minted lieutenant. I mean, you can't control any of that. But still, one thing that surprised me, and maybe it shouldn't have, I just haven't really thought about it before, was how he said that the Kiowa and the Chinook have more in common than they do differently. He said if you can fly one rotary, then you can pretty much fly them all, as long as you're aware of your space and your weight,
your mass.
Yeah, which, I mean, in retrospect makes sense. But I would have thought that there would have been more. I don't know, something
so
to make them a bit different to handle.
I'm saying the following is a complete and utter non-aviator, so please don't write in. But it seems to me as if the principles in regards to, well, just the aerodynamics, but understanding and being able to control the transmissions, the rotors, all those things. I like the flying principles. Seems like they would all be the same. You're just again accounting for exactly like you said, speed and mass and all of these things. So what do I know?
Yeah,
I know how to jump out of 47s. It's pretty fun, actually. But
I don't know. I mean, again, knowing next to nothing about helicopter aviation, I would have thought that there would have been some greater differences, some greater, I don't know, challenges than that. But okay.
So his transition into the SOAR, the Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think to ask him this during, but he was able to go over as a pretty junior guy, still as a first lieutenant. And I'm wondering, I'm sure somebody out there knows this, but if the SOAR was kind of opening up during this period because of the drawdown of the OH-58s, the Kiowas.
That is a good question.
If they knew, hey, look, we're probably going to have some, case in point, our Josh, right? We're going to have some younger, slightly less qualified guys, maybe even here at Fort Campbell, who are going to start sniffing around here, and they don't, to the letter, meet what our usual requirements would be. Do not just turn these guys away because, like, we, could be harming ourselves in the long run.
Yeah.
We could be turning away perfectly good talent just because of these, circumstances.
Well,
and I wonder if he was a beneficiary of that.
Well, I mean, maybe, but I mean, it also says something about his skill as a pilot. Because I mean, for the career path side, he was still first lieutenant, I think, at the time. Yeah. But he was a junior first lieutenant. He wasn't close to being promoted yet. But he did have. Like as far as the flight time and then the command flight time, he had that pretty close to where it was supposed to be, based on the numbers that he gave us. So it could have been just that he met, or that he was close enough to the requirements that maybe they said, "Hey, he's good.
Yeah,
let's waive this a little bit." So,
yeah,
I mean, it could have been entirely him.
Of course, I wasn't trying to imply otherwise. Just thinking more. Bigger picture. Yes, I know. I'm a terrible person.
Yes, you are.
So, got to spend some time in Europe. Again, this is after the first incursion into Ukraine that happened in 2014. So Operation Atlantic Resolve was the massive EUCOM NATO mission that was created to kind of help deter further incursions.
Yeah.
That's a whole other discussion, but so partnering with our long-term European allies, not all of them NATO, by the way.
Yep.
We're still allies with countries in Europe that aren't necessarily in NATO, and there's a whole geopolitical discussion behind the whys and the why nots and some of that. So got to spend some time in EUCOM in the Baltics, and I believe he said Poland as well. Very, very, very cool mission sets that they were doing over there. And we're continuing to do so as well. And then, came back stateside, and then he did say he spent some time back in the Middle East, Operation Inherent Resolve. I think he said he was at the beginning or the end of OIR.
I think he said the end.
I think he did say the end.
Yeah.
But a little bit of
spent some time in Iraq,
a little
and
bit
Syria.
of Iraq and Syria time, and then of course went back. They were deferring his time to go to the captain's career course, and then he never actually made it because of the accident.
Yeah.
So,
but at the same time, he said that he was not necessarily looking to keep going that route. That he was thinking about becoming a warrant officer just so that he could stay flying.
Yeah.
Because that was what he wanted to do the entire time.
Right.
So I mean, it's
it is not unheard of. Because I mean, personally, I know individuals who have resigned their commissions in order to become warrant officers to do a specific thing. Most of them were flight warrants, but a couple were on the artillery side as well.
Yep. I've known a couple.
And I've known a few guys who've really done all three, who were enlisted. I knew one that was enlisted, then went warrant, and then commissioned as officer, and then I knew one who was enlisted, OCS'd as an officer, and then resigned as commissioned, and then went in as a warrant. I know it's kind of all over the place.
There's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's not unheard of. I won't say it's common, but it is certainly not unheard of. So, but unfortunately for him, it didn't really come to that. He didn't get a chance to make that decision. So just kind of an open-ended question, but talk to me. Tell me what you think about the nature of the accident and kind of how he dealt with all that. I know you're familiar with BAMC.
Yeah. I'm not a motorcycle rider, so I can't really speak to that. I can speak to, being in an accident that I didn't cause and was not anything in my control. And that sucks. And especially the way it ended up impacting his career and his life.
Yeah.
That's awful. But as far as the medical portion goes, being at BAMC with the Intrepid Center.
What does BAMC stand for? We never established that. It's something Army Medical
Center.
Yeah,
Army Medical Center.
I can't remember either, so I don't remember the B.
It's been a decade, but
we put ourselves on the spot there. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, but there are so many great doctors there.
Oh yeah.
And the Intrepid Center with all the work they do is amazing. And I can't think of anywhere else that he could have gone for not just his medical treatments, but then having resources there, because I mean he handled the mental aspect of his injury well, from his own words. But for people that go through something similar but don't handle it well, that's where they need to be.
Yeah,
that's where they should be, because there are so many great professionals there.
Yeah,
to help you with the physical rehab, the emotional and psychological healing that you need after a traumatic event like that. That was the perfect place for him to be.
I've a little gallows humor, but I've known several guys who've literally had to be put back together. I mean, like literally their body parts were in multiple places. Yeah. And when it comes to the type of medical care that you need for something that major, the U.S. government through Walter Reed and through Fort Sam Houston and these medical facilities, they truly are world-class facilities. That it's going to be the best care that exists. All that said, if you have something minor, this is like the kind of the joke among service members always, right? It's like, if I get my part of my leg removed, the Army's going to take great care of me and it's going to be awesome. If I, you know, have a fracture and I need to get that taken care of, it's a 50-50 on the level of care that I'm going to get.
That's,
you know,
sad but true.
We'll say acute care.
Sad but true.
Like
sad but true.
If you've got a flu, you're screwed. But anyway,
yeah.
So, but I'm glad. I'm glad he was able to receive the care. Mm-hmm. Ultimately it's up to him and his family whether he made the right choice to go the route of the amputation. Although I would say, based off of, you know, from my nice, you know, lofty perch over here, it seems to me that was probably the right call. So,
yeah.
And it seems to me like he's been able to have a pretty normal life.
Yeah.
After that,
I mean, I can't say whether he made the right call or not because I've never been in his shoes, but he seems to be content with the decisions that he's made. And since his injury, he's met his now wife, and has one child with another on the way. Yeah. So I mean, I'd say things have turned out fairly well for him.
Well played, sir. Well played, Josh. Well played.
So,
okay. Any parting shots on Mr. Martin?
About the mental health aspect, about how, I mean, because he was in you know, surgery and rehabilitation and everything for a year-ish, which is a long time, and not really, through his own words, not really getting down on himself or allowing himself to be, you know, sucked down that vortex of you know, of issues
and opioid addictions and all the other things too. Yes,
and being able to draw on all his past experiences through, you know, training processes or selection processes or all these different things that he had been through, being able to draw on all those experiences to remain resilient when things were absolutely at his worst. That says something.
Yeah.
So.
Also, just kind of another thing. He said his mother was involved while he was in and out of his, you know, medicated state and then
TBI.
You know. But having a mother who was a OR nurse for decades, giving you wise counsel during that period is a blessing too.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as far as somebody making your medical decisions for you when you are not in the mental state to make them yourself, I think having a medical professional there, you know, as your decision maker, probably a good thing.
Well, we wish nothing but the best for Josh, and he's an ally of the show, and we'll see him around. He lives here in Fayetteville, so we'll have a beer sometime. So, okay.
So, free fire time.
Free fire.
It's a little different. You and I are both.
I was told there'd be no math.
There will not be any math. But you and I are both fairly well-read men. We enjoy reading a variety of things, and we understand the importance of words. Now, despite those things, we have both, just as everyone else has, opened our mouth and said something dumb. Or we chose the wrong word.
How dare you.
Or we phrased the sentence the wrong way. What have you, right?
I'm married. I do that all the time.
Yeah. Words are important and words have meaning, right?
Yes.
And as time goes on, language changes. Words change. That's why people have a problem today reading Shakespeare from centuries ago, or Nathaniel Hawthorne from a century and a half ago, something like that, you know, or Poe, right? People have, as time goes on, things from the past become harder and harder to read because words change, their meaning changes, language changes, what have you. So, if you could pick one or two words from that have gone out of favor, and you could reintroduce them into the common parlance, what would you pick?
Does it count if it's a word that is still in common usage, however, means the complete opposite of what it used to meant?
You know what? I'll allow it.
The word literally, this has been a jihad of mine for over 2 decades now, where the word literally means the opposite of what it was intended. The word literally means letters in Latin. That's a whole other discussion because, that's a little too abstract for our purposes today. However, when people use the word literally now, they mean figuratively. I literally walked 100 miles to come over here today.
I'll literally die if I don't get my iced coffee.
It's literally 1,000 degrees outside. Literally.
Pumpkin spice is literally the best frappuccino ever made.
Now, hold on now. Pump your brakes.
You and your pumpkin spice.
So, part of my jihad has been to retake the word literally and bring it back to its intended use.
Okay.
So that's my first one.
Okay.
You wanted another one?
I mean, sure, if you got another one, yeah.
No, I'm going to go with that.
Okay, just one?
I may think of another one, but in the meantime, I will reverse it back to you.
Okay.
So.
I try to use this word, and I've been doing it for years. I try to pick an abstract word. If I read it somewhere, I see it somewhere, and I look it up, and I like the definition. I try to do that and add it to my vocabulary. But one of my favorites is foible. Because one, I like the way it sounds. And two, it just simply means a slight flaw, weakness of personality or character. Nothing major. Everyone has their foibles. You breathe heavy into the microphone.
Not to be confused with a picadillo or an imbroglio with a silent G.
I guess you could call it a picadillo. Yeah. But it is just a slight character flaw. Someone that chews with their mouth open. Things like that.
I feel so attacked right now.
It's nothing, major or exasperating. It's just something that somebody does that, might be slightly annoying. Everyone has their foibles. So I think we should reintroduce the word foible back into the common parlance. Of course, it is also the weakest part of a sword. That's another definition of foible.
I don't know if I see a practical use for that use of the word, but...
Well, swordplay has kind of gone out of style, so...
Unfortunately. Although, if we brought back dueling, that might solve a lot of our problems we have in our country.
I completely agree.
A lot of people like to run their mouths.
I think that congressional disagreements between individuals or parties could be easily resolved with dueling. I'm not saying pistols at dawn, but
I'm not saying pistols at dawn.
I think people would choose their words a lot more wisely if they were going to be challenged to a duel if they phrased things wrong.
I think we would have less keyboard warriors if we brought back dueling.
That is absolutely true.
Because, folks, you may find this hard to believe, but some people think that just because you say something on social media or behind a keyboard, that it doesn't really count.
So, that is one word that I would bring back into the common vernacular. Do you have something else?
Okay, just to make this nice and easy, I think we should bring imbroglio, which is a great Italian word with a silent G, which is just to describe it's synonymous with foo-for-all. I know, I'm bringing out all the good ones. But a morass or a bad situation that is being made worse, etc. It could be a scandal. Oftentimes, if you do hear imbroglio used, it's synonymous with a scandal. So it could be with a political or leadership who find themselves roiled in scandal. Imbroglio.
Do you think the reason that it's fallen out of favor, perhaps, is because it is an Italian word, or an Italian originating word?
I didn't know if you're making an Italian joke there.
No.
Not, but okay.
I mean,
it's probably
English,
it's probably too much of an SAT word for most people's.
American English has co-opted so many words
Yes.
from various cultures around the world. So maybe that's why.
So literally an imbroglio.
Okay. Well, then, in that case, my second one would be harridan, which is an unpleasant woman.
It's an unpleasant woman. Oh yeah,
A shrew.
I've heard this word used to describe certain shall we say, politicians?
Yeah, well, I mean, people seem to resort to like the most base and disgusting way to describe people that they don't get along with or they disagree with. Fair. And I think that class it up a bit.
I certainly agree with that.
Harridan. So,
on that cheery note,
I challenge you, the listening and viewing audience, to open up your dictionary, even if it's the dictionary app on your phone. Find a word that you don't recognize and find a way to insert it into your everyday conversations.
I would recommend using a older dictionary because a lot of the words in the dictionary have been rewritten in the last few years, which is true. Another word, which is literally Orwellian. Yes.
So that's my challenge to you.
Yes.
And if you do find one that you like, go ahead and post it in the comments or post it on social media. Hit us on the Facebook or on the Twitters or
what
X's
words need to be expunged and which words need to be
resurrected. You can even do that. If there is a word that you do not like that you think should be removed from the vernacular, then by all means, let us know what that is. Or if you come up with a really cool one that you pick randomly out of the dictionary, let us know that one too. And who knows, maybe we will add it to our repertoire.
Fair enough. So please leave that feedback for us on any of our social medias. We're on all of them. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, X.
Yep.
Also on YouTube. There's a social media aspect to YouTube as well.
Yep.
Please like, subscribe the content, share with anybody that you think would be interested. We appreciate all the help out there. And
remember, your service matters.